Hi everyone, it's Tox from CritsHappen.com. Thanks for watching and welcome back. We're here with another critical preview where we take a game that's about to be on Kickstarter, put it through its paces, and let you know about our experiences while playing it. This time out, we're going to look at a game called Evolution from North Star Games. Now, Evolution is very different from some games you may be more familiar with North Star, like Wits and Wagers or Say Anything. Evolution is a 2 to 5 player strategy game that's going to play in about 60 minutes. In this, you're going to be in an ever-changing ecosystem where it's your job to create, grow, and survive different types of species. You're going to be able to add traits to species, you're going to be able to attack and turn some into carnivores where they become predators, or you have the option of becoming very defensive. The choices are up to you, but the choices you make are going to change that ecosystem and potentially affect your opponent's gameplay as well. Are you witty enough to stay alive to the very end and survive inside of this changing ecosystem? Let's find out. Let's grab our traits, let's grab our plant and meat food, and jump into the world of Evolution. Evolution is a very simple game to learn. The idea is players are going to introduce species into the ever-changing ecosystem. You'll be able to evolve them with traits and ensure their survival. However, food is scarce and carnivores are everywhere. Your choices are going to determine the fate of the world's species, not just your own. Which will survive, which will thrive, and which will become extinct from the planet forever. Now, the game is played with a deck of cards, and the cards are going to represent different things throughout the game. We'll talk about that in a second. You have plant food and you have meat food, and every player begins the game with a bag that they're going to store their food in, and then a species board which shows body size on the bottom, population on the top, and spaces for food to eat depending on your population size between 1 and 7. Now, playing the game is very simple. There are 4 phases. The first one is dealing cards to each player. You're going to start the game by taking 3 cards from the top of the deck for each player, plus 1 for each species you own. At the beginning of the game, you only have this one species, so you would take a total of 4 cards. Now let's take a second and look at these cards. Now, they're all some type of ability or trait inside of the game. In this case, we have ambush, warning call, cooperation, and burrowing. Now, the first thing you'll notice is there are numbers in the lower right, and those are very important for the very next phase, which is selecting food for the round. After you've acquired your cards, players are going to secretly choose 1 card to place face down. In a 5-player game, that's going to mean there's 5 cards placed face down. In a 2-player game, only 2. The challenge with this is the number in the lower right will all be added up later in the game to determine how much food is available in the food pool for all the species in the world to eat from. But this is going to be plant food that is placed out into the center. Meat is going to come from being a carnivore and attacking other species, which we'll talk about in a second as well. So, let's say I looked at these as my 4 cards in my initial hand, and I saw some traits that I would want to add on to one of my creatures and my species here later in the round. I may say, hey, we're playing a 4-player game, and I want to make sure that we have an ample amount of food, but not too much. So I could potentially say burrowing is going to be my food card for the turn. This would be placed face down in a pile where everyone is going to put their cards, and the rest are going to come into my hand. Now, these are just face up for us to see here. This is all secret information to all the players involved. Now, these stay face down in the center of the table until later in the round, so no one is quite sure yet how much plant food is going to be available for their species to eat. The next thing that happens in the turn is players can play cards. Now, the cards can be multiple different things. The first thing I can do is I can choose one to play as a trait. So if I wanted to give this species warning call, which says only carnivores with ambush can attack adjacent species, that would be a great card for me to build up later as I gain more species. The other thing I could do is I could create a new species. I could discard a card, get a new species board, and I would have a second species now. The species all come into play with body size 1 and population 1, and we'll talk a little bit about why those are important in a moment. The final thing I could do is I could discard a card to increase the population or increase the body size of one of my species. Now, the traits are all placed face down. Cards that you discard are all placed to a face-up discard pile. And you have some very important choices to make at the very beginning. Will somebody create a carnivore that could potentially come after one of your species? If you think so, you may want to discard a card and increase your body size to get defensive. We'll talk about why that's important when we talk about carnivores attacking in a second. You may decide, I want to increase my population with that last card that I discarded because I want to be able to eat more food. During the next phase where we eat, we're going to eat food equal to our population size, or possibly equal to our population size. And at the end of the game, the amount of food that is in your bag is going to count as victory points. And of course, the person with the most victory points is going to win the game. So you have some unique choices that you have to start out the game with. Now, let's presume that we had a 4-player game here, and we had all 4 of these cards as the food cards that players had played previously. We've gone through, we played a trait face down for our first species, we discarded a card to get a second species, and we discarded a card to increase our population of our first species by 1. So after all players have played their cards, you're going to reveal the traits that you have placed on your species for that turn. Now, it's important to note that a species can never have more than 3 traits. So you're never going to have a situation of having like 6 or 7 or 10 cards hanging around one species and getting this like uber gigantic powerful species. You can, with those 3 cards, make them very powerful though. If you did ever have 3 traits on a species, you are allowed to add a 4th as long as you discard one of the previous 3 that are in play. So you can change the species even within the changes you've already made. Now, once traits are revealed, the next thing that happens is you're going to determine how much food is available for the turn. Let's say these are the 4 cards in our 4-player game that people had chosen to place face down earlier when choosing food cards. We add up the total number in the lower right-hand corner, and that's the only thing on the card that matters at this point. So this is a total of 11 food. So we're going to end up taking 11 plant food and placing that out into the center, and that's going to be the food pool for this turn. These all get discarded. And then, starting with the active player and moving clockwise, each player is going to eat 1 food. Now, as you can imagine, it's never that simple. There are a lot of different options inside of the game that will provide traits that will give advantages to species to gain food when triggered events happen. For example, one of my favorite is Long Neck. And Long Neck says that whenever the food cards are revealed, you're going to take food from the food bank or from the food pool immediately. So there's ways that you can immediately get in there and start to make sure that you get enough food for your species. Now, why is this important? Well, let's say in a 4-player game, I'm the active player. The first thing I want to do is take 1 food for my first species. Then the next player goes. Let's say he takes a food for his species. Let's say the 3rd player had Long Neck as one of their traits, and 2 of these were already gone from the Long Neck's triggered ability. Well, then they would get to take a food on their turn as well. It comes back around to me, and I could end up having to take stuff as well. And what happens is each player is going around and taking food off of the board. This can become very challenging as the game provides more species and more abilities that are taking food out of this food pool before each player gets to choose. This is important because if at any point at the end of this round, if you have not eaten food equal to your species population, you're going to end up moving your population down to the size of the food that you've been able to eat. So if this was the way my board looked at the end of the round, I would end up having to move my population down 1. And as you can imagine, if you're unable to eat anything, your population goes to 0 and your card becomes extinct. Your species is gone from the planet. Now, if for any reason the species is gone from the planet, if there's trait cards on it, you're going to get to draw cards equal to the trait cards discarded. So you're not going to lose everything, but you will lose some time and of course lose that species. In addition, any food you ate that possibly ended up on your board and the species may go extinct because of becoming attacked, you're going to lose that food as well. So let's talk a little bit about attacking, because what we've done here is just eat plant food, which has been really fun and really enjoyable and very yummy, but we haven't really gotten into the attacking piece of the game. So here we have our original species that we took care of on our turn. We've eaten one food on our turn because we were the active player, and this species has one food. It's come around to the other player, and we see that he has gotten very aggressive. What he has done is he has developed a carnivore which may attack and eat other species but can never eat plant food. And he's added pack hunting. Pack hunting says +3 body size when attacking. We'll talk about why that's important in a second. In addition, he's beefed him up even more by discarding his third card and creating this body size +1 to get him a body size of 2. Now, why is that important? Well, first off, we should be scared because this is a really hungry, angry, nasty carnivore. What this guy is going to do is he's going to turn on his turn to eat. Because he can't eat plant food, he's going to attack another species. Now, our warning call is very important because it says only carnivores with ambush can attack the adjacent species. Whenever you bring a new species into play, you can choose to put them on the far right or the far left of your existing species, but never in the middle. So right now, this species, while it doesn't have any traits and hasn't been built up, is safe. If I did not have warning call, this carnivore could attack this species, and because its population is at 1, it would end up going extinct. In this case, the only species that the carnivore can attack is this one right here in front of it. So to determine if it can attack, the first thing you do is compare body size. The carnivore has the ability to attack this, so we're good to go here. His body size is a natural 2, but pack hunting gives him +3 when attacking, so his body size is 5. As long as the body size is greater than the species body size that they are attacking, the attack is successful. What that means is they're going to take one meat from the meat supply and put that on their food board, on their species board. And then the population of the defending species is going to go down by 1. Now what that means is as it comes back around to my turn, I'm not going to be able to take a second plant food and put that on here because my population has gone down. That's going to limit me on the number of points I could get at the end of the game. So when it comes back around to me, the only thing I'd be able to do is take a plant food from the pool and put that onto my second species. This means that I had the opportunity to get 3 points on my first turn, but the carnivore took a point away from me because my population went down. What I mean by that is at the end of this turn, you're going to take the food that you've eaten and put that into your bag. This keeps your score somewhat secretive, and people will have to remember how much you've eaten along the way to judge where they are in terms of point placement against their competitors. But it also makes for some really interesting decisions about who you're going to protect with some traits, who you're going to make aggressive with other traits, and how you're going to balance out your own ecosphere. There are quite a bit of different options in terms of traits that you can put onto creatures, but the key thing to remember is you can only have 3. And play is going to continue with more species coming into play, more traits being put on them, food being brought out into the pool and being eaten by species one by one, and carnivores attacking, decreasing the population of other species, and eating meat for themselves. At the end of the game, you're going to get points for several different things. You'll be able to score 1 point per food that gets put into your bag, 1 point per trait on surviving species, and 1 point per population of surviving species. So if throughout the course of the game you have built up 10 species, but only 2 of them survive at the end, only those population and only those traits are going to count for points. So it's a delicate balancing act in this ever-changing ecosystem. So that's Evolution. Evolution is a very interesting strategy game. It's a game that at first seems very simple. You think to yourself, well, this is easy enough. I just am going to increase my body size to protect myself. I'm going to maybe make this guy a carnivore, give him a couple of traits. Ooh, wait a minute, I'm getting attacked. What's happening here? Wait a minute. Oh, wait, I lost my population. My guy's extinct. That's how quickly it can happen. There's a lot of different things that change inside of the ecosystem every single turn and every single player's turn. I really enjoyed that. What you do on your turn truthfully dictates what's going to happen with your opponent's choices throughout the game. Our first game we played saw a situation where someone had a defensive species in the center that had a warning call to protect the species to the left and to the right. And depending on what traits your own species had, if they were a carnivore, they really couldn't attack anything she had unless they had a specific trait. So it was up to you to figure out what cards you were going to play and what cards you were going to adjust your own species with to make sure you could get through that player's defenses. It was really well done, and it really provided an environment where you went into the game thinking, this is the strategy I'm going to enact because these are the cards that I'm starting the game with, but then suddenly you have to adapt and change to that ecosystem based on what your opponents have played. That's provided a lot of fun. I really did enjoy also the fact that everything is handled by the cards themselves. Whether it's the plant food decisions that you have to make on how much food goes into the main food pool, whether it's discarding the cards to increase your body size or your population, or whether it's discarding cards to get new species. The challenge is you never always have enough cards to do what you want to do. So you really have to pick and choose when is the right time to add a new species. If you wait too long, there might be too many predators that could kill off and make that species go extinct by one simple attack. But if you try to grow too fast, you may not be able to increase the population and get as many points from feeding as you could if you were to focus on one or two species. So there's a delicate balance that you have to go with. The nice thing about it is you have the full realm of choices to do whatever you want to do. If you want to be aggressive and start the game with a bunch of carnivores, you can do that. If you want to be defensive and turtle up, so to speak, pardon the pun, you could do that as well. If you wanted to produce a bunch of species that are just trying to grab food very quickly, you could do that as well. We actually found a nice little side effect to the game too. Because of all the adjectives and all the names of the traits that are going on the creatures, we tended to find ourselves naming our creatures. Now, if you remember, you can never have more than 3 traits on a creature. So it's not like you're going to have the climbing, camouflaged, carnivore, hard-shelled, all these like different things piled up. Because you're only going to have 3, it's going to be very straightforward. However, you can find some pretty funny and interesting combinations inside of those. Like someone who is a burrowing creature but has a hard shell. Or one of my favorites was burrowing with horns. That would be kind of hard. But it's possible, and it provides some really good interactive moments inside the game. Now, aside from the interaction of the jokes and the naming and the discussion of the characters and the creatures, there is also a lot of player interaction that we found when you flip over your traits and you start to look at, ooh, okay, how did the ecosystem just suddenly change and what can I do? I was originally going to attack that player, but now they have something that's going to protect that species, so now I have to shift and change. There's even times where you get to a point, if you have carnivores out and no one to attack, where you may actually have to attack one of your own species. You can do this, and sometimes it's needed to make sure that your carnivore survives, but it provides for really interesting and dynamic choices throughout the game. Overall, we have had a great time inside of Evolution, and we're looking forward to seeing their Kickstarter launch and checking out the final product when it's available. If this is your type of game or something that interests you, you can check them out with the Kickstarter link below in the video description or at the end of this video. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed this critical preview. Let us know your thoughts. Feel free to leave your comments below in the YouTube channel. You can of course chime in on Facebook, Twitter, and Google Plus by searching Crits Happen or at our homepage at critshappen.com. But until we see you next time, we hope you enjoy all of your species inside of Evolution. Thanks so much for watching. Keep rolling those dice, and we hope they're all crits.